she says very beautifully in the film that she never set out to be a pop star. She wanted to be an artist. She wanted to be able to sing and write music that she believed in.
They tried to bury me. They didn't realize I was a seed.
What a powerful documentary.
Thank you.
We pass so much judgment on people without really knowing what is driving their actions. And this really opened up my eyes because people just judged her. I mean, I remember when it happened and the vitriol was just so powerful. And I thought, oh my God. I mean, I was raised Catholic, but my reaction wasn't like, let's kill her. It was just like, everyone has their own opinions, Was that the driving force behind you wanting to show this?
Well, yeah, I mean, I just think, as a young Catholic Irish woman myself, growing up in the late 80s, early 90s, she had just meant so much to me and my friends and our contemporaries. And, in the early 90s, to discover her, to totally love her and everything she stood for, and then witness how she was treated was just very demoralizing to me as a young teenager. And I think it left a huge dent, which then certainly sowed the seeds for making this film all those decades ago. And yeah, you mentioned the backlash. I mean, it's shocking when you see the backlash in this film. I've been in festival screenings and people have gasped. It's amazingly violent, really, and it just doesn't make any sense. And I think to see this young 24-year-old woman being treated with such hatred, it's just it's very demoralizing. And I think it was of course it was a huge part of the story that we needed to look at and put in front of people, because the media have done such a fantastic job with Sinead of painting her as somewhat flippant and issue hopping, and they've done this fantastic job of being very reductive of what she has to say. And really, I just wanted to make a film that turned that on its head and hopefully, creates a different perspective and is one that's told in her own words and her own voice.
It was just, it's really powerful. And I think some of those people, I mean, some celebrities like a Joe Pesci and other people who kind of mocked her, I hope they watch this film and be like, wow, we were really harsh on her for not really digging in to why was she was feeling this way. And, it wasn't talked about then, right? The whole child abuse and so I think we were aware of it, but it wasn't on a full scale.
It was very, very, very early days. And, beyond the celebrities, I just think as a society, people are watching this and thinking, oh my God, what a misunderstanding we have had of this person. And I hope what it might do maybe in a very utopian hope of mine, just that it makes you stop and think about who else you might be misjudging or, reading the wrong way and being less judgmental on. So that's something.
And especially the men, Irish, especially the media, she sits down with this gentleman, I'm assuming the journalist or reporter, and he's just so harsh, like, oh, you're bald, oh, your parents must be so ashamed of you. And they're like, what the hell? Who talks to their guests that way? And just some of the other commentary, I think the Charlie Rose, right? You have Charlie Rose in there, same thing too, like, you're gonna kill me if I don't ask you why you're bald. Like, why do you care? It's a statement. It's a fashion statement. End of story.
Well, it's I mean, it's Guy Byrne. He's one of Ireland's most famous presenters. People have commented on how harsh he was. I think he was actually hugely fond of Sinead. But looking back, it does all come across very patronizing and reductive. But I don't think he meant to be harsh. I think it feels incredibly out of step and out of date when we see it now. But the reality is of their relationship, I think he was incredible. He was almost like a father figure, or he saw himself as one to her. It just is very, very patronizing to contemporary viewers, to say the least.
Yes. And Sinead kind of narrates her story. Did she want to stay off camera? I think it's more powerful to hear her voice. I don't know if that was, what was the, the thinking about that, behind that?
Just well, exactly what what I said before about how reductive the media backlash or just how the media have been so reductive of her voice in the past. It was of critical importance to me that her voice was the key character in this film, and one that you really zoned into. Also because it's not a birth to today biopic in any means, or an obstock. We didn't need to have lots of contemporary footage or be following Sinead around in any way. We just needed to have her tell her story, and to keep you in the era that we're in, 1987 to 93. It just felt really important to be able to hear the story and see the time without mixing it all up too much. I feel like contemporary talking heads would have really dragged you back out of this very immersive space that we worked really hard to create. So that it was a creative decision early on.
It was such a shock for me to become a pop star. It's not what I wanted. I just wanted to scream.
Was she receptive to it? I would see, someone like her who's kind of shied away from the media would be a little hard to get on board. Was she on board immediately, or it took some time?
Well, the history, this backstory to this film is that I worked with her, and I made a short film for my master's in 2011. Reached out to her managers at the time to use her stems from her music, which they thankfully let me do. And then they asked me to do her first music video in 15 years in 2012 for her track Fourth and Vine. So that's where the relationship was kind of solidified. And then when I went back to the wider team in 2018, because it's such a archive-driven documentary based on this very small chapter of time, we didn't need very much from Sinead other than the interview itself. So from that perspective, she happily took part in the interview, and that's what we needed to be able to tell the story.
And I love how you juxtapose the history of Ireland, the patriarchy, and just some of the horrible things that happened to women. I think she was like in some sort of convent where they sent women who accused men of rape, or they were considered troublemakers, and they were just horrible to them there.
Well, it was one of the many institutions in Ireland, that was run by the church. It was more of like a reform school, but she was the school she was in was attached to Magdalen Laundry, which we all know a lot more about these days. Where often women who had babies out of wedlock were sent and incarcerated for the rest of their lives. So she had this, this experience of being in a school that was attached to one. But yeah, I mean, it just really reflects and shows, the control that the church had over its citizens, and particularly its women.
Yeah, it's quite frightening to see it. And it's in black and white, so you assume it's like a long, long, long time ago, but this was in the 80s.
Oh, this was in the 80s, absolutely. The footage of the laundries is the 1920s, but the point of using that footage was that so many of the women that Sinead then meets in the 80s are women that had been incarcerated since the 20s in these institutions, never allowed to leave because they'd had children out of wedlock. And as it says in the film, sometimes this was due to rape. So it's a very lurid history in Ireland, and certainly one that we're not proud of.
It's eerie to watch back in the 80s and 90s when she spoke about abortion and the women on the streets with their picket signs, and we're going through this today in the US. It was like, oh my God, I can't believe we're going backwards.
I know. It's been interesting because the film came out in January and felt slightly brighter in this country, in America then, and it's been horrifying to watch what's happened in the last 6-7 months. And the mirroring of what went on in Ireland, and how it was such in the dark ages and then dragged itself out to supposedly be one of I think it's the top 10 most liberal countries in the world right now, which still feels crazy to me given where we've come from. But it's just really fascinating then to mirror and look at what's happening here, how everything's being dragged backwards. That wasn't planned. That's just the world turning on its head. But what I hope is, and what I really hope actually is that this film is super galvanizing for women out there who will continue to protest and hopefully turn things back around. You know, it's just, you know, I think what the film does show is that actually collective action can create change. Just can take a long, long time.
Every person's duty to themselves is to act on their feelings and to say when they think something is wrong.
And take the consequences.
I imagine so.
It's sort of difficult to watch, and you really feel for Sinead and those early images of her. She's got some like these angelic eyes,
She does.
and you don't know that this turmoil is,
No.
behind it all. Because usually you can tell when people have been through a lot and their eyes kind of reflect that. But she just has such an angelic look, and then her angelic voice to go with it, and to find out like all this trauma went on in her childhood is just, I don't know, it's heartbreaking. And then I think hopefully, most people will go back and reflect. Who knows? I mean, what does she expect? What do you expect after people watch this film? Do you think there's some mea culpas waiting?
Is there some what?
Mea culpas waiting from some certain people or the media?
Correct. Well, I think that's basically, I mean, what I've experienced so far and what I hope will continue is that people are left utterly enraged, but galvanized. You know, what I didn't want to do is make a film that just makes women leave feeling horrific, even more so than we often already do. I just wanted to make a film that made them furious enough, and then also hopefully created, I love the final line in the film about her being a seed that, that they tried to bury me, they didn't realize I was a seed. For me that was just so important to be able to leave viewers with that notion that after all that was done to her, what she has done, whether it's directly or indirectly, she's inspired generation after generation of people. And I think there's huge joy in that and positivity, that all of these actions and all of her boldness has actually helped really. So certainly in Ireland, with all of our own referendums, we had the abortion referendum and equal marriage referendum, you could feel her spirits there very heavily. She's inspired so many of the next generation to go on and kick the door down and speak out.
Obviously, the Catholic Church is at the center of this trauma as well. The church has improved. I mean, in Ireland, how is it seen? Is it still seen as like it has a hard grip on the population still, or is it lessened?
I'd say hugely lessened. I mean, what was fascinating was when we showed this film in Ireland for the first time in Galway in July. We screened it at the Galway Film Fleadh, and we got to the scene of Saturday Night Live where she rips up the Pope. And I was very anxious. I was thinking, my goodness, how is this going to go down? I was in an audience of packed out cinema with the youngest being maybe 16 and the oldest being 98. So it was a real cross section of Irish society. And we got to that moment and the whole audience stood up and started cheering.
Oh.
I'd say there was at least 400 people in the room, all cheering. And I just thought, wow, there we are. Hopefully that answers your question of where we're at with Catholicism in Ireland. There's been so much pain caused and trauma caused, and the country is just reeling from what's gone on. And there's a lot of work being done to try and start healing this transgenerational trauma that's very, very profound.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's happening here with the religious right. Yeah. They just want to control women's bodies, and that's why this documentary is not just about Sinead's trauma, but they're reflecting on how 30, 40 years later it hasn't really changed much. You don't really touch upon it because you see your focus on a certain time period. Was she traumatized at all by this whole backlash, or was she kind of proud that she stood her ground?
I mean, I can't speak for her at all, but I would say it was a horrific thing for her to go through in terms of how she was treated. I think it was disgraceful. What does she regret it? No. Does she regret doing what she stood up? She stood up and did, not in the slightest. And I think you know, she says very beautifully in the film that she never set out to be a pop star. You know, she wanted to be an artist. She wanted to be able to sing and write music that she believed in. So I certainly I feel like she's been able to do that now. She's had so many critically acclaimed albums since this period, but you know, of course, being treated like that must have been deeply disturbing and very, very uncalled for.
Yeah.
And I think that's really where, you know, how I would like people to, you know, to step away and have a bit of self-reflection after this film. And, you know, I think it's maybe about being a bit kinder to each other and less judgmental is of utmost importance.